This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
A lot of people are saying, "Oh, Julian could come back. Oh, Julian might come back." What do you make of that?
Well, a couple things. I listened to the podcast and I do think this is a situation, and, Nick, you know it from radio. I know it from, either writing or podcasting or what have you. Sometimes, especially when you're athletes, I wouldn't say that Brandon Marshall is there scripting these shows and doing a lot of research. I would say he probably has a producer who, says, these are the topics that we should talk about. And, Edelman had been in the news about, this, however serious he was about possibly coming back, what have you. So I don't know. They hit that a lot. To me, that spoke of some producer saying, like, this is a good topic to go off of. I think it was clear from his comments multiple times, Julian Edelman's not coming back. No. I mean, his body is just shot, let alone, he did say, I feel pretty good now, but that's because, he's cut weight. He's not, he's not taking a pounding. I mean, he's not coming back. His knee's shot. He knows that. He knows to get at his size and the way he plays football, he has to prepare himself like few others in the NFL. And he just can't, his body can't do it anymore. It can't. So leave Julian Edelman alone. Stop talking about him coming back. It's not happening. It's just, it's not. So that, sort of bothered me. I think there were a couple topics that they touched on that sort of, called out to me. I thought that, he was asked on what makes the Patriots great. And, he talked about basically accountability. The guys like, Teddy Bruschi and Troy Brown and Kevin Falk and, those guys, they were always there. They always held everybody accountable. The guys who weren't, doing their job and not working hard enough, they would get on them to the point of embarrassment. I thought that was interesting. And it just led me to think, who's doing that on this team? And I think there's been some question in the last, I would say the past 5-6 years on, whether they still have that. I mean, there's no Dont'a Hightower anymore, who we know Dont'a Hightower could look at a guy across the locker room wrong and scare the living crap out of somebody to get their ass going. Right. I do think a guy like David Andrews still does that. I think that Devin McCourty certainly does that to a certain extent, and Matthew Slater. But are those guys, are they really the type of guys to get in your face and tell you you're not doing your job? Or are they just more, I see them as more lead by example guys and, maybe talk here and there. But I think, this comes into the Mac Jones discussion. I think that Mac Jones has to be one of those guys. And I do think, as we talked about before, I do think one of the noticeable things on the practice field in the offseason practices was Mac Jones taking more ownership and getting on guys. Like, you need to do this. You need to go inside or outside, or I saw it this way. You need to do it that way. That's going to be vital for this team. Mac has to do that. Somebody on the second level of the defense needs to develop that. I don't see a lot of guys I don't think Matthew Judon's that type of guy. He's more of I'll just do my job type of thing. But I do think some sort of linebacker needs to emerge in the Mayo, Dont'a Hightower mold. For if this team's really going to rise up, it's going to have to be Mac Jones needs to take a huge leap, and somebody at linebacker has to develop.
It'd be interesting, Ja'Whaun Bentley. When we talk about Ja'Whaun Bentley, we say we know what we should expect from that guy. We know who he is, and all of that is true. But when you really think about it, we talk about guys who have pressure on them. Bentley could have some pressure on him because he's the one dude on the second level that you feel you can depend on. Right? Again, we're seeing if Raekwon McMillan will step up. We're going to see if Mack Wilson can do the job, and if Cam McGrone can get healthy. If Bentley falls back in any kind of way and doesn't produce, that's going to be a problem. And then also, you might look to him to be that voice in the room because he's the dude that is the veteran, that is the steady hand on the second level. So, Bentley's an interesting guy that we can look at. But I agree with you about Mac Jones. Mac is telling receivers don't round out their routes. He's running, routes for wide receivers to tell them and show them what to do. He's definitely stepped up, and I think the pressure is a lot on his shoulders. About Mac Jones, I know Julian Edelman talked about him, said, he's not there yet. And Edelman also said he was a little bit worried about the defense. Greg, your thoughts on those comments?
Yeah, I thought those were interesting. I thought that, and maybe this comes from playing with Brady and seeing Brady and he's loyal to Brady, but I thought that I wouldn't say that Edelman was over praising Mac Jones at all. A lot of it, I wouldn't say he was, disrespecting him or anything like that, but it was a lot like, yeah, he had a nice year, but he needs to get stronger and, he needs to keep working and he needs to take that leap. But I think Julian's absolutely right that the way this team is constructed, it's a lot like the early dynasty Patriots teams where Tom Brady wasn't the GOAT. He was just, a master facilitator who had ridiculously clutch moments. And I think that Mac Jones can be the facilitator. Can he be the clutch guy? It was a question we asked last year. I do think there were some signs like the Dallas game coming back from an interception and throwing a touchdown, right after that, where there are certainly signs that he can be that guy. But just like with Brady, you have to earn it on the field. You have to prove it on the field. But I think Edelman's absolutely right. This team needs a strong defense. Edelman's right to question whether they're good enough to balance, give the offense enough chances. I think that was a big issue last year where I think the offense in large measure was good enough and produced enough, but they weren't getting the ball enough in games and not enough possessions. And I think they're going to need more this year.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I know you listed some of the receivers in Patriots lore and Patriots history. When we look at Edelman, we'll get into something else that he had to say that has really been all over the place, especially on social media in a minute. But when you look at these receivers, how do you kind of stack up Edelman when you look at him as a Patriot receiver? Where is he at on your list, Greg?
Well, I mean, he just riffed off like Stanley Moss, Troy Brown, Wes Welker. He didn't really place himself in there. I mean, look, I'm biased. I covered his entire career from Miami to New England. When we talk about, and they talked a little bit about, is Julian Edelman a Hall of Famer? And he said he even admitted probably no, because of his regular season numbers aren't there. And I do think he was going to make the case of, but the postseason matters more, and that's legitimate. And a lot of people make that argument for him. To me, I think, let's just deal with, just Welker and Edelman. I think that to me, Wes Welker was clearly, in terms of the Hall of Fame material, it comes Wes Welker and then Julian Edelman maybe gets a look at that because, Wes Welker had the regular season stats. He doesn't have the Super Bowl titles, but, he still produced all the time. And I just think that, there's no doubt in my mind that Stanley's number one about, all the Patriots receivers, and I would probably have Wes Welker, then Troy Brown, then Julian Edelman, or, in that sort of, I'm taking Moss out because he wasn't here long enough in terms of Patriots receivers, but that's where I would go.
I agree. Like if you had Moss on like a 5 or 6 year run, then forget about it. Like that,
right.
What that dude did in his limited time was just almost inconceivable what he accomplished offensively with Brady when he was here. So, I mean, look, I think people will crystallize the argument with one singular play for Welker and Edelman in that argument. And I think it'll be Welker dropping the pass against the Giants in the Super Bowl and Giselle yelling after the game and people thinking about the Edelman catch against the Falcons, which was just absurd. I think people will go back to that. But when you talk about, totality, it's tough to argue against Wes Welker. I do think Edelman does have the feather in the cap when you talk postseason, because that dude in the biggest games, he showed up and he gets literally knocked out on his feet against the Seahawks and just keeps playing. He makes that catch against the Falcons. Just so many different things that he did, even, trying to play in the secondary a few years back against the Ravens in that game. So, I mean, I think when you talk postseason, Edelman is going to absolutely be, near the top of that list, if not at the top of the list. The other guy is postseason is Deion Branch and what he did for his time with the Patriots. He showed up big, obviously. The last thing to talk about as far as what Edelman had to say, Yeah, he kind of piled on Jimmy Garoppolo. We go back a few weeks ago or a couple months ago now. I don't know when it was. All time kind of runs together. But Martellus Bennett dumped on Garoppolo going back a little while ago. And Edelman was kind of, presented those quotes by Bennett, and he didn't disagree.
Nope.
He threw more gasoline on the fire. Just, your thoughts on how those guys on that team with Jimmy G kind of view him now, looking back at some of the things that he decided to do that they obviously disagreed with.
Yeah, I think it was legit at the time, and I remember talking to people around the team and asking, like, is Garoppolo tough? And the response I would get is not as much as you would like. And now I will point out that Edelman was wrong in saying that it was Jimmy's non-throwing shoulder. It was his throwing shoulder, and I remember sort of the arguments at the time. Should he play? And, guys like Felger were going after Garoppolo. And look,
no way.
Yeah.
Felger was going after somebody, Greg. You don't say.
Yeah, it's legitimate. And like, I do think Jimmy was getting advice from his agent because he was going to be a free agent after the season. And they saw, chance to set himself up, starting opportunity, what have you. I do think that, though, that Jimmy should have, knowing that Brady was coming back after 4 games, I think that Jimmy should have done whatever he could to play for those 4 games. It not only would have given the Patriots their best chance at winning all of those games, but it would have, it would have proven himself to his teammates and also people around the league. And I think that, just basically like a quarter and a half or what have you, it was that he did, it was great and all. And at the end of the day, Jimmy got what he wanted. And I do question whether he thinks it's wrong. In hindsight, I bet you he doesn't. I think he's comfortable with the decision that he made because I think him and his agent didn't want to put bad film out there. That, like, he hurt his throwing shoulder, and now all of a sudden he doesn't have as much zip on the ball. He's throwing like later Chad Pennington, and all of a sudden he hurts his market, where now he can say, no, I was just hurt. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the type of dynamics that go on in the NFL. Edelman laid it out well about how, how he's playing with this and that, getting shot up and broken ribs and this and that. And like, this guy has a sore shoulder and he can't play. And that's legit. Those guys look at each other and it's, warrior type stuff. It's not for the faint of heart. It's, the criticism is real, even though fans want to say, oh, well, that's not the way. Yeah, it's real. That's the way these guys feel. If they're out there giving up their bodies, which 95% of them do week in and week out, they expect their teammates to do the same because they're all working to win a Super Bowl. And when at least the perception is that guy's not doing it, he gets tagged on it, and it's tough to live that down. And I think even with what we've seen in San Francisco, I think there's questions about that. And it'll be interesting to see how Jimmy reacts to this going forward. Personally, I don't think it changes his mentality one iota.
He made a personal decision, and he made a
business decision.
A business decision. Yep. He made a personal decision and a business decision and a wallet decision. And guys see that. You're right. Whether you think it's fair or not, in the outside world, that's the world they live in. And, you see some of this with the vaccination stuff. Last night, Tanner Houck not able to go for the Red Sox. They blow a lead in the 9th inning against the Blue Jays. And, some guys, no doubt, look at Trevor Story. Trevor Story said, look, I didn't want to get vaccinated, but, I talked to the team and I want to play in Toronto and we got to play against the Blue Jays. So I'm getting it. And there's no doubt that some guys, like the Kyrie Irving thing last year in the NBA and how that's caused friction with the Nets, you're expected to, again, whether it's fair or not, you're expected to put your own personal situations and thoughts on the back burner when you're a professional athlete in a team sport and, do what's right by the team. And Garoppolo, he's been tagged with that stuff as not necessarily always doing that. And obviously, Bennett and Edelman have doubled down and told us that he deserves that tag. He deserves that label placed on him. It is interesting, now as we look at Jimmy G, and I'm not a huge fan of Jimmy G. I don't think he's very good. I think he's pretty much average, maybe slightly above average when he's healthy anyway. But it is interesting, Greg, to see how his agent and Jimmy are kind of playing the opposite side of this, right? Now they're saying, well, he fought through injury when he was a Niner at the end of the season. He wasn't healthy. and it's not necessarily fair to judge him. He just had surgery, and so they're kind of playing the other side of this coin now. They're saying, well, he wasn't healthy though. He was like, if you didn't love what he did at the end of the season last year, he wasn't healthy. So they're kind of picking and choosing when it's the right time to pick and choose.